I dropped the ball on many clients, and I probably could have had way better numbers last year. But I thought I could do it all. That was something that it was a hard lesson for me to learn and feeling shame and guilt about. So when you're filming content, you feel like you have nothing new to say. As we were hitting this wall of, oh, we've already made that video. You never know what someone's first video that they see of you is going to be their first. You know, people aren't watching your content chronologically. You never know. So you have to continually create the same content, but in just a slightly different way.
You closed one deal from YouTube your first year, 44 for 26 million in 2022, and last year for over 32 million.
Money is not necessarily the motivator as much anymore. You get to a point where you're like, what am I building this thing for if I'm not going to have time to enjoy the fruits of my labor?
You're a former teacher, but what's cool is you closed one deal from YouTube your first year, but then 25 deals in 2021, 44 for 26 million in 2022, and then 60 families helped last year for over 32 million. So I was curious, with everything that you know and that you see, is there anything that just seems so obvious to you, but when you talk to other people, especially those who want to get onto YouTube, that's a little less obvious for them?
I think one of the things that I learned along the way is that it's just really very easy, and we tend to really overcomplicate the process. And, you know, there's a lot of great people that have training courses and things like that, that you can use as a good resource if you really need, you know, that direct instruction. And yet, you know, it's really just copying and duplicating what other people are doing and having success with. And there isn't any magic answer. It's just in the process of doing it. And that's what I have figured out along the way. It's just that time over task over time. And, you know, one of the biggest reasons that you see that upward trajectory, or that we've seen in my business coming directly from YouTube, is just that consistency in doing it. And those numbers are just naturally going to grow every single year because you have more content for people to watch. You're getting more viewers. You are able to link videos together and kind of create bingeable playlist on one particular topic. And you don't necessarily have the luxury of that in the very beginning as you're, you know, putting your first couple of videos out there. So it's not something that's complicated, and you will get better as you go along. And that's something that I've learned to embrace.
So I saw, like, you mentioned that you struggled early on, like, as most people, probably all of us do, like looking at our views, and we get kind of caught up and it's like, oh, the videos aren't performing as well. How did you kind of like keep pushing through even that early on struggle to keep going? Because it's easy to want to like give up and get demotivated, especially early. But
yeah, so in the beginning, I kind of started this journey around the same time that a few other agents did as well. And I would kind of keep track of their numbers and their success. And when I say keep track of their numbers, it was more so their visual numbers of what I could look on, you know, on their channel and see how many subscribers they had, how many people were watching. And I would get very discouraged because I wasn't having that same, you know, vanity success that those other agents were. And yet we were closing deals, you know, from YouTube, and people were calling and reaching out. And it wasn't until about a year later that I had a conversation with one of those agents at a conference, and I realized, like, oh, we're doing a lot more than you are. And that made me realize that at the end of the day, you know, these numbers that we pay attention to do not mean anything if people are not reaching out to you and using you to help them purchase a home, because that's what's paying the bills at the end of the day. And so now we try to focus much more so on, are the leads coming in versus our subscriber counts going up, or our view counts on certain videos, you know, popping off. But it's hard.
So, yeah, it's definitely hard looking at the views and kind of not like looking at other people and saying, man, why are they doing like so much better than me. Like I know I fall into that trap personally. So I was curious, like, because you see different people, you went up with different people, but you got different business results from it. So I was curious if you look at and think about what might have been different, whether it's like the topics of the videos, maybe it's a script, maybe it's something you did. What do you think was the difference for you?
I think one of the differences treating this as if it is your lead generation, because, you know, being super consistent there, it's hard whenever you get busy. It's very hard to not get caught up in serving clients and then not carving time out in your schedule to still continue to create the content. I think another thing that gave me that success early on was I realized that in order to make this happen, I was going to need a lot more leverage in my world. And so that was having, you know, I couldn't edit these videos myself. I had to have an editor that I hired that out to. I needed administrative help on the back end of making sure that the leads that were coming in, that we were responding to them in a timely manner. Someone helping coordinate with our editor to make sure that everything was getting edited to the way that we liked, and that person wasn't me communicating with the editor. So those things were key in helping us be able to continue to put out a video every single week. And, you know, there's definitely, you know, weeks or times where I'm just like, the last thing I want to do is to go film a video. And yet, you know, that is our main lead generation source in the business. And so, but it's grown to be this. And, you know, I think also in hindsight, one of the things that served really well is that as we were implementing this lead generation source, I still had to feed my family, right? And so, you know, I didn't stop doing the other things that were previously serving me in my business. And it wasn't until the leads from YouTube got to be such that I was able to stop hosting open houses and stop cold calling and calling expireds and all those things that got business, but yet they weren't the most fun things to do. So I think it's just a combination of those things and just being super consistent.
Yeah. And I want to get into leverage, but I feel like there's something that you said earlier on. One, you said like, kind of like the saying, like, don't chop off your nose in spite of your face. Like, don't cut off one side of the business before the other one is generating business. I think that's really big. But also the fact that you said treating it like a business, something like I've seen Ken say, as I know a lot of people look up to him. I do, like Ken Pozek for anyone. He said he never deletes like a day for content. He always moves it. Yeah. And what I've seen, what I've realized too, is like, especially you as a team leader, you have clients, you have your team, you have your family, you have so many things going on. Like, I'm sure when you go to film content, there's probably 101 different fires going on no matter what. Like, there's probably something going on when you're going to shoot content sometimes.
Yeah. And there's also times when you're filming content and you feel like, okay, it's hard to get excited about this or to be enthusiastic about what you're saying because you feel like you've talked about this topic for 10 plus videos and you have nothing new to say. But one of the things that was kind of like an aha moment for me as we were hitting this wall of what content to make and thinking like, oh, we've already made that video. And I actually saw this from someone on an Instagram content creator that coaches on Instagram. And they were saying, you never know what someone's first video that they see or the first reel that they see of you is going to be their first. So while you may feel like you've made this same content again and again and again, you know, people aren't watching your content chronologically. They're not starting at the very beginning and watching all the way through. So that was a light bulb moment for me of like, oh, you know, you never know what someone's first video is going to be. So you have to continually create the same content, but in just a slightly different way.
Yeah, I think Gary has talked about that in a lot of different ways. It's like everyone gives him like flack, Gary V, for like saying the same thing over and over again. And he says like you have to say things in a different way, the same thing in different ways for it to like resonate with different people. So
yeah, and we've all been in that situation too, where, we've heard lots of great advice and we'll hear it again and again and again, but sometimes it's just that 10th time of hearing it, you're in a position where you can receive it and it clicks for you. And so I think content is the same of what we're doing as well.
So when you look at like your content process and like how you kind of schedule it throughout the month or throughout the week, what does that look like now? And how do you make that into something that you repeat?
So when I first started making content, I tried to do it a lot of different ways. So there's a lot of great agents out there making really great content, and there's some that do it on location filming style. So, Ken and his videos are typically on location, and I tried that for myself in the beginning. I tried using also a green screen. I felt like I didn't have a good enough background in my house to make videos. And what I learned is that both of those situations did not work for me and what worked for me in my business. Specifically, filming on location is incredibly hard with the weather and time of day. Fires pop up in the middle of the day. And unless you are extremely leveraged or, can really protect that time, I found it to be incredibly hard to consistently have all my ducks in a row to put out content like that. So I, went back to just filming talking head style, where I'm talking to the camera and, layering in B-roll on top of that. One of the things that we have found that works well to help us stay consistent is building up a library of B-roll footage. And this was a process of kind of like learning by doing in the beginning, where whenever we would come up with video topics, and plan what we were going to make for the next month, we were like, okay, well, we need this on video, we need this on video. And then it was kind of a divide and conquer and let's go out and capture that B-roll. Maybe others have had this realization, way before I did, but I kind of realized like, okay, we're going to be making videos again and again and again about these same areas, same topics. So let's just spend a few hours and get lots of different shots of the area and kind of spend like a content B-roll day of collecting more than what we can ever think that we need, so that a month from now, 2 months from now, when we go to make another video on this area, we don't have to go back out and get content. We already have a library to pull from. And so that has really helped kind of streamline the process, so that now there's a handful of occasions throughout the year where we need to go grab footage of something, if it's a new development or something like that. But for the most part, we have that big library to pull from. So that's extremely helpful as well to streamline the process. But we do plan out our topics for the month. We try to stick to a bucket strategy. So every fourth week, we're staying within some sort of category of video content that we're providing. And so I have a really great, amazing assistant that's been with me for the past 4 years, and has really helped build our channel. And so she and I meet, every week and kind of plan out what those, not every week, every month, but kind of plan out what those weekly videos are going to be. And then from there, we kind of, make some outlines of topics that we want to hit within those videos and make sure that we have everything that we need for that.
Interesting. So when you look at those buckets, like I know one for you, like as big as kind of like the relocation, moving to Georgia. Like if you're to explain those buckets to someone else, what are those buckets kind of look like for you?
Yeah. So once a month, we give some type of market update video. And in the beginning, that was something that wasn't something that was kind of encouraged, because it's not evergreen, right? So it's only good for that moment in time. And yet it wasn't until we started doing live stream videos and giving that market update and realizing that those were some of the best performing videos that we had. So incorporating those market update videos once a month is very important. It also became super, super important during the pandemic, because, the market was changing very fast. And what we found is that our clients really understood what to expect in that home buying process from watching those videos. So it made buyer consultation so much easier when, they're consistently watching content that's referring to local data and, what's happening here in our local market. So that's been super, super helpful in having that bucket of content that we do once a month. Another video topic that tends to do really well for us is any videos that we make about new construction. So new construction is a video bucket for us. Another thing is like a things that you need to know blank, things you need to know before this. So that's kind of like a list video. And so that's a topic that we rotate through. Previous ones in the past have been pros and cons of living in blank, cost of living. I also live on Lake Lanier, which is a lake an hour north of Metro Atlanta. And so that's kind of like a very unique type of home purchase whenever you're buying a lake house. And so that's another, video idea, but it really, really makes the content planning much, much easier when you can refer back to those buckets and kind of stay on a schedule. It also helps in the fact that you're not repeating topic ideas too close together, and you're giving the YouTube algorithm that time to kind of figure out who the audience is and what's connected.
That's smart. So I was curious because everyone does say like, oh, why, even still to this day, like why do market videos? Those don't perform well. You found they do well for buyers. Like, do you see it help with sellers at all, or just curious?
Yeah. So really because of the consumer behavior, and I would say that Ken is kind of an exception to this rule, and he's been able to adapt his channel to serve more of like a local audience and a relocation audience. Ours is still very much a relocation based video channel. So we occasionally will get some local clients that will reach out to us from seeing the videos, but it's just not necessarily in a seller's natural behavior style to go and look up relocation content or come across your channel organically, because that's just not their behavior searching on YouTube. So we are incredibly buyer heavy. And that is a byproduct, good or bad, from, using YouTube as primarily a lead gen lever. But the great thing is, coming up on making content for 4 years now, we should start seeing some of this turnover from clients that we helped several years ago that now either need to move up or move down or move somewhere else. So I'm excited to see how that translates in the business in the next few years.
Yeah, I think one thing that sometimes gets overlooked is like, if we just look at like Zillow, like you look at the behavior on there, you could say, technically speaking, a lot of people who go onto Zillow are buyers. Like there are a lot of sellers that masquerade as buyers beforehand. So there's probably like a little benefit there for you. And then, as you kind of mentioned too, like now you're coming up on 3 years, you're going to start to see tailwind of that from people moving from their original purchase.
Yeah, for sure. And we do get to capture, what I've noticed surprisingly is we do capture a little bit more of a local audience whenever it's a different part of the Metro Atlanta area that they're interested in learning about, or they're buying a house on the lake and they live an hour away and they're trying to learn about a different type of community than what they currently live in, even though they're still kind of considered local. So that's always exciting whenever we get to work with those clients.
So that's what I was going to ask you next. Like, now are you kind of looking at like, how do I maybe target those people locally? Or are you thinking through that? I know with the whole commission settlement and everything, everyone's mind's around sellers. So I just wasn't sure if that's like something that you're thinking through from a strategy perspective.
Well, I think one of the great things that Ken has done is transitioned, his business from targeting relocation to being, a household name or a recognizable, brand in the Orlando area. And I think that's something that every agent can strive to mimic and do. And it's definitely something I've, thinking about in my business, how can I, transition in that same way that Ken has been able to do in Orlando. So definitely behind the scenes, studying his business and learning things that he's implemented and experimenting with some different things. But I do think that is something that you can grow into or not. But at the end of the day, there's lots of opportunity there, regardless of if you grow it into something else or if it's just a relocation-based channel.
Yeah, I agree. And you kind of mentioned something really briefly. I noticed that you do pretty consistently, which is live streams. Is that because you use it for testing topics? Do you use it to it's easier to add a video that's a little less high production, doesn't need all the bandwidth of the process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started doing live streams because I saw Ken doing live streams, and his live streams were getting tons of views. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. And it's going to be great. I've never been able to replicate that same success that Ken has on the live streams in terms of that many viewers watching it live, asking questions. But we have been live streaming now for 2.5 years. I was doing it every week. Recently went to every other week. And one of the benefits that I found is even if I'm not getting in the moment like that big of, viewership, people are very loyal that attend those live streams. And what I noticed was that people would ask questions during the live stream. You would see their name kind of come up frequently over the months. And then, 4 months later, you get a phone call and you start asking that person some questions. And then I was like, oh, wait, are you, I Hate Florida 2022, on YouTube? And they're like, yes, how did you know? And it's like, well, I could tell by the, some of the details that you've left. And so we were able to recognize that our viewers that turn into clients were actually utilizing that. And it's just a way to deepen that connection with your audience. And then another strange thing is, I was anticipating this, but if you go back and look at the analytics from a live stream, so after you're finished with that live stream, YouTube just posts that as a regular video on your channel. For me personally, I think it's not my natural behavior. I wouldn't go watch a live stream, that someone recorded and posted that is old news by now or not live anymore, but so many people do. Some of our live streams get just as many views as our recorded and edited videos. And so from a production standpoint, it's so easy, that there isn't there's no editing on the back end. It's just me talking live and hoping that people join and ask questions so that I don't have to talk for 45 minutes straight. But those videos perform pretty well. So it does serve a purpose of giving, our YouTube algorithm more content to put out there, and gives our viewers, some other video topics to watch. But we try to, really engage the audience and try to answer those questions in the moment. Sometimes we'll have guests on like a mortgage lender and try to make it exciting and fun. But yeah, people really like them, even though the audience during the live is very small.
Yeah, I think that's something that's easy to gloss over. It's even though the live audience might not be as big necessarily, you still get several hundred views after the fact. And I don't know if you're familiar with the whole, there's this Google formula of 7, 11, 4, which is, I'm probably going to butcher it. 7 hours of content, 11 touch points in 4 different platforms or something, that they figured out. Your lives are 20, 30, 50 minutes long. So if one person is on even for 20 to 30 minutes, you're getting so much time with that person and so much trust built just from that live video.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I think is funny is in the live stream, I'll say, hey, welcome, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And so in the moment, you have some people that are responding to that, and it never fails. A few days later, we'll start getting these comments on YouTube, oh, I'm watching from, New Jersey, and they think it's live still, but it just, goes to show that people do like that content. Yeah, even though at the moment there's not a ton of people.
That would be really interesting, especially in real estate, if Google had a way to, like, if you asked that on every single live stream, and if you could have Google look at all that data, you could probably build up this data of like, oh, people are starting to move or look in Georgia from New Jersey, yeah, or like from X city. I think that would be kind of cool to just look at that data over time. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. We recently, so a lot of our clients are from Florida, which is surprising to me because if you look at relocation data, that's the biggest state where people are moving to. But for me personally, it's one of the states that we get the most clients moving away from. And so we recently made a video of why are so many people leaving Florida for Georgia. And it got so much engagement. And so one of the lessons that we've learned along the way is that controversial topics or speaking negatively about something is great for engagement. It's great for videos because, you know, got lots of people commenting, why would you ever leave Florida? Or people aren't leaving Florida, and, you know, all these kind of defending their position comment.
Do you ever feel awkward? Like, do you ever do anything negative about Georgia? Like, I know some people feel awkward about saying negative things about like their area. Like they say, oh, I never want to talk bad about like my area where I work in.
Yeah. So, I learned this from watching other agents do this, but other agents were making content about why you should never move to blank town. And they were saying some negative things of, you know, the traffic sucks and this is what you're going to have to deal with. And the housing was really expensive and it's hard to find. And yet there's still an audience that appreciates your honesty. So even if they were never considering that area, and they connect with you in a way because they feel like they can trust what you're saying because you're giving them the good and the bad. And then also for a lot of people, some of these negatives may also be a positive. So, you know, you can always kind of put that spin on it a little bit of, you know, giving the positive side or, you know, don't move here if you can't handle these things, but here's all the great things that people love about this area. And that's why they choose to put up with, you know, the high home prices and the terrible traffic because of all these other things. And so negative titles perform so much better than positive titles.
Yeah, that's true. So when you look at like your live and your regular and you're sitting through with like your admin, how does that like strategy process work when you're trying to figure out like all the different topics?
Well, for example, we have a live stream coming up 2 days from now. And so usually live stream topics are kind of the moment. What do you want to talk about? And, you know, sometimes it's like really easy to come up with that of, you know, some sort of headline or something that's happening here locally. And then sometimes it's a struggle, you know, and then so we go and look to recent news articles about developments or maybe local legislation that's passed that's affecting a lot of people, or interest rate headlines, or, you know, things like that can give us great inspiration. A lot of other things that provide good topics for live streams are those questions that you get from clients. And that's been a great source of content inspiration, is that as you start working with clients from out of state, their experience is going to be a lot different than what your experience is living here locally. And they're going to notice things that are a lot different than what you would notice or that would be on your radar. So we've been able to address a lot more topics or come up with video content ideas directly from working with our clients and the things that they've noticed as being very different.
So do you save this anywhere, or do you just personally, like, it? I know personally you probably have the context, but like sometimes, for example, you're like your admin, like, do you guys catalog questions or catalog ideas or like save stuff that, oh, maybe this would be a good topic anywhere? Or
I would like to say that we're that organized and detailed. Usually it's just in conversation every day, or working with a client and someone doing something, and it's like, oh, that would be a great idea for a video topic. Let's write that down. And so kind of filing that away or slotting that into a schedule. Problems that we've had with clients turn into be really great video topics. Things where we made a mistake in assuming that people know something or know how it's done, and then realizing like, oh, well, let's make a video about that so that, they'll know what to expect. And so like a common thing here is in Georgia, we use closing attorneys for our title work. And it is very, very customary for both the buyer and the seller to attend closing at the same time at the same table. To me, that was just something that's normal. I've only ever been an agent in Georgia. Come to find out, that's not how it's done in a lot of other different states. Buyers and sellers never see each other. And so, it's just that's a great video topic. Or what are the things that you need to know about buying a house here in Georgia that's might be drastically different than your state. So.
Yeah. And I saw like kind of like what you mentioned that like new development, stuff like that. Like, so do you guys go to like here in Tampa, I live in Florida, there's the Tampa Bay Business Journal, and that is like a lot of good sources for topics because they talk about new construction, development, commercial, there's stuff like that. Like, do you guys go to anything like that to find that stuff, or is it just browsing Google?
Yes and no. So one of the difficulties that we've encountered in Atlanta proper, you have the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that covers a lot of great content in there. But once you reach the suburbs, which is where majority of families and everyone is migrating to and relocating to, the news sources are very fragmented. And so it is very much a piecemeal work of, we're subscribed to like 5 different newspapers and websites and, piecing all of those things together.
Okay.
There's a great opportunity here in the metro Atlanta area to have like one little news media source. And talking with other people and Ken's like, well, why isn't that you? And it could be, and yet it's a lot of work pulling all that together.
Yeah. You said something that YouTube rewards minutes watched versus percentage watched. Is there anything you've learned around that and around retention on videos?
Yeah. So once I learned that, it was, okay, what's the target length of all of our videos? And so we always want our videos to be somewhere between like 8 to 10 minutes in length. 10 minutes is kind of the ideal cutoff because for me, I find it very hard to make engaging content that keeps someone's attention or to even talk about something, for that long in length. And the 8 minutes is important because that's where YouTube, maybe you can talk more to this, something about their ads and what they put on videos and they favor, that at least having an 8-minute video. So that's what we strive for. And I probably could personally get more in the weeds and looking at the analytics and retention rates and click-through rates. There's occasionally times where we see like, okay, that video is bombing. Let's try changing out the thumbnail. But I really don't get too into the weeds of analyzing all of that data just because I'm busy. There's other things that are more productive use of my time. And, what we're doing is working. And so it's not to say that we're not learning and trying to implement new things all the time, but I just personally don't find a ton of value in getting that nitpicky about things.
Yeah, because for you, ultimately, like the cost benefit of weighing like, oh, if I spend this extra hour or two to kind of like fix this thumbnail for you, like you might as well just make the next video and focus on the client at that point.
Yeah.
For your time.
Yeah, definitely.
So, is there anything that you've kind of, I know you being a team leader, like in one focusing more on execution, but looking at your channel, you obviously have learned a lot and put great emphasis on like your thumbnails and on like making sure the content in the video is good, using B-roll, having a good script. Like, if you had to tell someone, like, here's the 20-80, the Pareto's principle, like, here's what to focus on to get the most out of what they do, you speaking to like another team leader who's busy, what would you tell them?
I would say that the most important things are, one, just doing it and being consistent, and just trusting that you're going to get better as you go along. Thumbnails are just as important as the actual video. That was something that was not obvious to me in the beginning, and something that I learned from others who are much greater at YouTube than I am. But essentially, that thumbnail is like the book cover of your video, and that's what someone is browsing through, and you want them to click on it. And so if you have an amazing video, but your thumbnail really stinks, it's not going to get watched. So I am not great at making thumbnails. I'm terrible at it. And it just kills me to see all of these terrible thumbnails. Because objectively, you can look at it and be like, okay, that's not what all these other great YouTubers' thumbnails look like. And so I may not be able to do that, but I sure can tell someone else, hey, make something look like this and go do it. So thankfully, my amazing assistant has become amazing at making thumbnails, but it's something that we grew into. And if it wasn't something that she had the skill to do, I would for sure pay someone, really well to make sure that those thumbnails are really good. And that really good person is likely not going to be someone that you find on Fiverr. I've learned that lesson through the years. So thumbnails are really important. And then and I think the editing is also very important. You have to have good editing, and that's what's going to make just an okay video be really good. And part of that editing is using B-roll. And so sometimes it's not necessarily what you're saying or how you're saying it, but it's like how that video is being presented, and making engaging content. So I've seen some agents have really great success that their on-camera presence isn't that great, and their personality doesn't really come across very well, but because it's been edited and they have a good thumbnail and they're consistent, they have success from YouTube.
So you've mentioned kind of like twice, like in passing, like the B-roll. So are you, with the ideas and stuff that you come up like monthly, you make a list of like, oh, here's the 3 to 5 things we should go shoot, and then like you or your assistant goes and shoots it? What's that kind of look like?
So now it's rare that we have to actually go out and get footage of something that we don't have. Usually it's something that's newly developed, or a new construction neighborhood, new shopping development center, that sort of thing that's gone in. But when it comes to generally talking about a town, we have, tons of great footage for that. So one way that I could be better in our business is, being a little bit more, leveraged professionally, but I am a little bit cheap. And so in the beginning, it was my assistant and I dividing and conquering, getting B-roll footage on our phones with a gimbal. I've tried hiring local videographers to get what we need. And my experience with that has been really bad, in the sense that, they'll come back with like a 30-second clip of a bird on a park bench while some kids are playing. And it's like, how could I be more clear that that's not what we need? And so one day I'll find that magic person that gets it. But until then, sometimes it's just easier for us to go out and get it. Another thing that I learned too, that's not my natural behavior style, is you, as an agent, as a person living in your community, you're out and about all the time with lots of great opportunity to get B-roll for your future videos. But I had to train myself to start thinking like that. So if I'm at an outdoor festival in our town, like I should be getting some clips for that or future videos. Because those moments only happen every so often. And so you need to capture that. Another thing that has come up is working with clients and hearing their feedback on things that they're surprised about here in Georgia. So one thing that clients are surprised about is that our driveways sometimes are not always flat. They're a little bit steep. But what I consider steep and what someone else considers steep are two totally different definitions. So now when we are in a neighborhood and we see a steep driveway or, something that we know would be a good representation of what we're trying to explain, we stop and get B-roll of that so that we can match up, those words and ideas that we have and give them a visual representation of what that actually looks like. But you just start to pick up on those things as you...
Yeah, you're showing what you're talking about so that they can visualize it and be like, oh, okay, I see what she means. Yeah, you're showing what you're talking about so that they can visualize it and be like, oh, okay, I see what she means.
Yeah, and in the beginning, you're tempted just to use stock images off of, those stock websites and things like that. And that can help, but people are watching your videos for you to be the trusted resource of your area. And showing a steep driveway of some house that looks like it could be in California, for example, versus what one looked like here in Georgia, it gives someone a very clear idea of like, hey, this is what it looks like right here. And those are things that we've just picked up on over time that make a good video and prevents us from having to go out and get a video footage of a steep driveway just because we included that in this week's script. Like we already have that because it's something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it's smart to build up like that B-roll library because then where you're at 3 years now, it's like you just only have to go out for the every so often new thing. You at least have something you can source within your own.
Yeah, definitely saves a lot of time.
So you mentioned like a couple things like video editor, like your assistant. I was curious if there's any tools, people, things that you have found have been a good investment into like the YouTube as a business for you, like stuff that you guys use regularly for your channel or other people, stuff like that.
This one may be obvious to others, but it didn't really come to a realization as this was something that we needed until we started making YouTube content. And that was a dedicated phone number that we could differentiate other than my direct contact number. So prior to YouTube, it was just myself and, it was my phone number that was being put out there. And what happened is, you'd be in the grocery store and you would answer a phone call and then it's like, oh gosh, that's a YouTube lead. I want to give the best first impression possible, but also I can't get into everything right now because I'm checking out at the grocery store. So we came up with a Google Voice number that we used. And as the business has evolved and more people have been added behind the scenes, we've transitioned that over to an app called Grasshopper. And what that allows is essentially like a call routing feature. So first line of defense, it goes to this person. And then if that person doesn't ring, it goes here. You can also set up time blocks around that so that on the weekends it rings to this person. If you have shared text messages on the back end, so everyone can see that same text message and respond to it. So that's helped us differentiate clients and also just respond really well to them. Having a great, easy way for people to reach you is super important. One of the systems that I learned in the beginning, or as you start getting more leads from YouTube, you can't be the person that talks to every single person. And the reason for that is that your videos, you're encouraging people to reach out to you. And so when people do start reaching out to you, some of those people are reaching out, but they're not moving for 3 years, 5 years. That's not a good use of my time to talk to that person and get wrapped up in a 30-minute phone conversation. But that is a great conversation for, someone else on the team or an admin person to get their email and connect them with really great resources and put them into our database so that we can stay in contact with them over the next couple of years. So, having a really good database CRM system that has some automation to it is also really something that's really important. And it's only as good as the person that's actually using it. So, it is one of those things that you actually have to use as well. But there's really not any other magic tools that we use a ton of that leads a lot, in terms of productivity around YouTube. It's, after someone calls, it's just your traditional real estate business. And the best thing is that when they do call you, they tend to know a lot more about you. They're a lot more invested in you as a person and, happy to talk to you. And so in that sense, it's different, but otherwise it's a client in real estate.
Yeah. I think that's the big difference with YouTube. It's someone basically asking you to work with them, and it's like working with a Sphere past client. The trust is already there versus buying a lead. You're going to have to work a lot harder to earn that trust.
Yeah, completely. And I think one thing I found that's been a little bit surprising in this is that you either have those clients that really feel like they know you, they're so excited to work with you, and they're great clients. And then you have some people that reach out to you because they learned about the area maybe from the YouTube videos, but maybe they've only watched a few and they're just treating you like you are just some random agent. And sometimes those clients can be difficult to work with. And one thing that's been a challenge for me, especially as you're growing a real estate business, you're just so excited to be getting leads and phone calls and people that want to work with you. But you as an agent are not meant to work with everyone that reaches out to you. And that's been hard for me to learn because there's some clients that are just completely unrealistic and not worth the time that it's going to take or not take to get done to where they want to be. So that's been something that has been challenging for me to learn along the way as well.
I think one thing that probably helps you, separate yourself is not being always that first point of contact.
Yeah.
And creating that separation. I've kind of seen and realized that some things that some top agents like yourself, it's easy to take for granted that I don't think is always as obvious sometimes, is just how much you've learned about the sales process and building those systems. Just that tactic alone of having a Google Voice number, kind of having an info at Gmail, very specific. It's an old school way of tracking leads. So stuff like that, the automation you set in place with Grasshopper, you just simply using the CRM. I've at least kind of seen this past year, especially, that even just buyer consultations aren't widespread throughout the industry. Not everyone knows, we should do some form of consultation before actually meeting them. So,
well, and your statement reminded me of something. So in addition to having that dedicated business line specifically for YouTube videos, we also have a dedicated email address that we put out there. And I have tried really hard to take my email address off of everything that I can, so that the only thing that we have out there is hello@KeyPoint Homes Group. There's several people that man that email, and this happened because as we got busier, I was dropping the ball because I was not seeing emails come through or being like, okay, yeah, I'll get back to that person. And then a week goes by and you're like, oh shit, I never did that. And so for me, it's kind of like a juxtaposition of still thinking in some ways that I'm this solo agent that's just getting started in my career and excited about every single person that comes my way and I can do it all, to transitioning to that mindset of it can't all be me. And, the only way to grow is through other people and with other people. And have to trust that what you're building is something that can support all of those additional people as well. And yeah, that's been something that's been a struggle, and I'm slowly making progress in all of that.
I want to touch on that in a second. I was just curious to kind of like put it, kind of like wrap it a bow on, like when you look at your sales process from like lead until client, there's probably a few pieces that you have in place when it comes to like they come in through somewhere that kind of gets managed by someone. You put them on somewhere somehow, and then at some point you maybe enter the conversation. I was just curious what that might kind of look like.
Yeah. So we implemented like a link to book a call on our YouTube in the description. So that's like the main method that we try to get people to use. That takes them to a Google form that asks some basic questions, where they're from, what their time frame is, budget, area that they're interested in, best time of day to call, and anything else we should know. So that helps us with scheduling, because, if they're asking for a $200,000 house in the metro Atlanta area, that's not going to work. It also helps us prioritize how quickly do we need to respond to that person. If they're thinking about moving in 3 years, that's a phone call that can wait until Monday morning when we get back in the office, versus someone that's saying like, hey, we're in town this weekend, or we'll be there on Tuesday and we need to buy a house. So we found that having that kind of screener really helps. And so that email is managed by 2 admins. That phone number that we put out there goes directly to one of the admins as well, so that if they're not filling out that questionnaire and they're directly contacting us, she could have that preliminary conversation with them on the phone. And then based on their answers, based on their response, someone's reaching out to them, either because they filled out the form or in the moment, and scheduling them on my calendar in correlation to their responses. So if they're calling in asking for a rental, we don't help with rentals. We have a great resource that we put together so that we don't feel like we're just dropping the ball on them, where we can still provide some sort of help. So we have a lot of templated emails that answer some of those questions for people that don't necessarily need help right away. So typically they're screening them, and then it gets put on my call, or my calendar rather, for a buyer consultation. One of the things I've learned from Ken recently is to do as many Zoom calls as possible with those clients, rather than a phone call. And the purpose of that is that you eventually are going to get to a point where you cannot physically serve all of those clients that are reaching out to you in the manner of showing them houses and being, their everything agent. So I have a buyer consultation with them. In that buyer consultation on Zoom, I explain that, hey, we're excited to work with you. It may not be only me showing you houses. I have an amazing, agent partner that's also going to be working with you when you're in town to see houses, explaining the benefit of that to them. And so then I get the satisfaction of knowing that I've met them face to face, even though I may not be the one meeting them face to face at all the houses. But it helps me remember them and build a better relationship with them as well. And that's much more successful than doing it on the phone, which is how I used to do it.
That's smart. You start to build that relationship without having to like be the one meeting them all the time is interesting.
Yeah, completely.
So you've mentioned like one, you were not as good at the leverage early on, but now it seems like you've mentioned like 2 admins, like video editor. So it sounds like you're starting to build out a lot more leverage, and you've freed up more of your time. Was that tough? And what do you think is the good transition for you? And what are you kind of looking at in the future?
Yeah, so it was definitely tough in the beginning, or that first hire wasn't very tough because I knew that like, I needed additional help. I think it was knowing and trusting as you're growing in your business after you make that first hire that you're busy enough for that second or third hire. Because you're looking, or at least I'm talking my own experience, I was looking at the numbers and not necessarily feeling like I was there in my business yet, but knowing that I was feeling a lot of like, gosh, I just don't want to do this anymore, or getting burnt out and feeling overwhelmed and feeling like, why can't I just do it all? Or how does everyone else do it? And realizing that if the goal is to grow, you have to have those people around you that can support that. I'm talking to myself here, but I'm also very hard-headed about this. I usually don't really realize it until after the fact. And it's usually me messing up. And so one of the things I learned last year is I dropped the ball on many clients, and I probably could have had way better numbers last year, but I thought I could do it all. And whether it be control or not wanting to slow down to go forward, that was something that it was a hard lesson for me to learn, and feeling shame and guilt about letting those people drop away or drop the ball on them, that realizing that I just needed more people. And then also from a family perspective too, that's really, really hard. Is I get a lot of great personal satisfaction from building my business and getting those wins, almost to a fault where, that there is no off button, and, you still have to have that for your family. And so over this past 2023, it was a lot of realizations for me of like, okay, we can't continue to do things this way, and I have to leverage more in my life to make it all work. And, when you, not to continually keep referencing Ken, but, he's a huge inspiration to all of us. And he has an incredibly massive team that he has built with a lot of people supporting him. And it's not necessarily because the business was there at that time. It was the fact that he is able to invest back into his business for where he wants to grow it. And he had the people there that he could help get him to that point. And there's often times where I have to keep referencing him in my mind and what he's been able to do and how he did that in relation to, how I want to grow my business.
Yeah. And quick question on that. Did you hire all those admin as like full-time immediately, or did they start off in more like a part-time or supplemental role at first?
So I was lucky in the fact that I had a full-time assistant as we were starting the YouTube channel, just from my other sources of real estate business. She initially started off as a part-time assistant, and it was like a month into it, and I realized like, okay, I can fill up your day some more. And yeah, so she's been with me now for 4 years, and amazing. And her role has kind of evolved and changed, and she's very instrumental in the YouTube success. But what I realized for other leverage and support that we have, you have to hire people full time. For me personally, I feel like, if you want to find someone great and loyal that can help you build your business and take you to where you need to go, someone part-time is not necessarily going to be able to fulfill that. And you kind of have to question the commitment that you're making to what your roles are as well. If you think that someone part-time can handle that, then I don't know that you're really committed to what you want to do.
That's a good point.
So it adds a layer of good, healthy pressure on there as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole like go back to broke mentality where it's like, okay, like I'm going to add this person knowing that, okay, now I have to cover like their salary. Like Ryan Serhant talked about this where it's like, I couldn't necessarily afford, I mean, I could afford a driver. Obviously him in New York, a little bit different than most. But he just used that as like, okay, I really only have to close 1, 2, 3 deals and the driver has basically paid for itself.
Yeah. And that is a great way of looking at it. And even not closing more deals, but if that person can free up so many hours of my time so that either I can relax, I can go work out, I can not have to worry about XYZ, even if I'm not replacing that with business, if it's bringing me that peace of mind, because eventually you get to a spot, or I have with my career, that money is not necessarily the motivator as much anymore. And you get to a point where you're like, what am I building this thing for if I'm not going to have time to enjoy the fruits of my labor? So that's also something I'm having to reconcile as well.
Yeah, you give yourself more time back to spend with family. Right. So yeah, that's crucial. So just curious, like you have 7,000 subscribers on YouTube, probably more. You have like your Instagram, you have all this stuff going on. I was curious, when you look at like your marketing strategy, like the vision for what you're building, where's your focus at least for the next like year? Like what are you trying to like really double down on or move into?
Well, we have really been trying to, now that we feel like we have YouTube pretty much down, I think down, I mean, it's a well-oiled machine. It wasn't taking a whole lot of, thought, energy, and effort into it. So how can we take that same success that we're having on YouTube and transfer that and or master another platform? So right now, Instagram, TikTok, trying to figure out the magic behind that. And that's been a little bit more frustrating than what I thought it was going to be, in the sense that these platforms are all so different. And the lessons that you learn on one doesn't necessarily translate into the other. And so it's a lot of, trial by fire and a lot of error and some wins, and then trying to figure out, why did that work? So that's really what the effort has been on behind the scenes, is trying to figure out how to maximize those.
Okay. So trying to move into like a new top of funnel platform like Instagram and TikTok.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah.
So just curious, like, I know we talked about Ken, like if there's anyone or anything like that you just consistently go back to as like, whether it's a source for like business advice, life advice, podcast, book, YouTube channel, like sources for your information and inspiration for stuff. Is there any that come to mind?
When it comes to YouTube, outside of networking with other agents, I think it's just so crucial to build those relationships with other agents that are in the space that you want to be in and learn from them. Because there's tiny things that I've picked up on that I've shared with others, and vice versa. That's like, oh, that's such a great idea. Why didn't no one's shared that little tiny thing? Yeah. And usually it's those like little small improvements that make the biggest impact, or have a lot of great payoff behind the scenes. Christina Smallhorn is an agent who's mostly just a creator now, and she does a lot of referral business, but she was very, very instrumental in helping me learn behind the scenes of why certain things work and why they don't. And so she's been a great success. When it comes to podcasts, I love listening to Mel Robbins for a lot of personal growth. And, being in the Keller Williams world, we get exposure to a lot of great speakers and people. And Phil Jones is another recent one, author of Exactly What to Say. And anytime I'm in a room or speaking at something, or anytime I can listen to what he has to say, I am getting a lot of value that is really kind of transcending into all different areas of my life that I can apply. So he's been very great too here recently.
Yeah, Phil is amazing. Just how small like one word can make a difference.
Yes,
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So if people want like more, they want to see what you're up to, where should they go?
You can find me on YouTube. My channel is Moving to Georgia, and over on Instagram, Sarah Maslowski, Realtor, and that is where you can find me. And of course, if you have any clients that are relocating to the North Metro Atlanta area, I'd love to be a great resource for them.
Nice. Yeah, definitely check out her YouTube and her Instagram. I'm going to be watching since you're going to be focusing on that, saying what you learned. One last question. I was curious. You mentioned Christina kind of taught you how to look at things, what's worked, what's not. What have you found as that like gauge to be like, okay, besides just like this video just got 10,000 views and really went viral, is there anything that you just kind of, this went really well, let me double down into that? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think it's, so she was the one that really taught me the importance of buckets, and also the importance of giving those buckets time to work. So, you can't just try one video topic and put one video out there, and if it bombs, think that that's because it was a bad topic. You have to do it for several months and then go back and analyze the performance of that. And my understanding is the reason behind that is that the algorithm needs time to find the audience for the video, learn who was watching it. And so that has really been helpful in the fact that we've over time adjusted our buckets of content based on videos that performed really, really well. And so then that becomes a bucket in and of itself. I think another thing in that too is paying attention to other video topics that other people create and that have success with, and finding out and asking, why was that video so successful? Was it because of the title? Was it because of the thumbnail and the title and how it was presented? So even outside of our real estate world, looking at other industries and videos that are performing well on YouTube and learning from those has also been very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Looking outside the real estate industry, it's where you can find like inspiration that no one else is doing, pull that in, and then you stand out from that. So that's awesome. Definitely. So thanks for sharing, and thanks for coming on, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.